PEI chef and TV host Michael Smith is with me. He is a fast cook who is not a fan of fast food. He has put 110 simple, speedy recipes in his newest cookbook called Flavours. What was the last cookbook?
Oh, it was called Chef Michael Smith's Kitchen. It was sort of my favorite recipes. You know, I'm the guy that loves to riff around and play with different ideas, try this, try this, try this. But I think like many cooks, I come back to my favorites, and that's really what the last book was.
And what have you learned about the art of making a cookbook, designing a cookbook?
Oh, a lot, Fanny, a lot. I'm blessed to have a great team around me. We work very hard on these books, and we take it very seriously, but in sort of in a light way. And I guess what I mean by that is that the way we write these recipes, the way I write them, is designed in many, many ways to just encourage people, to draw them in. I think the essence of it is that so many recipes these days, they do two things. First, they suggest that there's this thing called perfection, that's what we're striving for, perfection. And I take great issue with that. I think that's bad energy. I find that ruinous. It makes people believe that just around the corner is failure, that they're on the edge of screwing things up. And as a cook, I know that that's just not the case. And on the other hand, a lot of recipes these days sort of give you that litany of do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, get this. And I prefer to take the approach that we do this, but when we do, this happens. And then you can do this. In other words, so much of cooking, like so much of life, it just sort of flows right by you and you miss it. And you're not present. And with a little bit of insight behind the ideas, you can actually treat a recipe and the cooking experience as a learning experience. And that's really what we need today. We need to help get folks comfortable in the kitchen. That's what we're trying to do.
Okay, and I said in the beginning, in your case, you can speed and not get arrested.
Sure. I can speed and get arrested too, but that's another story.
Of course you can. And I bet you've been. Have you ever been in jail?
Never been in jail, no, but I've certainly sped a few times. Let's just say I'm blessed that television, or that police officers' wives often watch Food Network.
I bet you are. What car do you drive?
I'm driving a great big long Ford these days. We have a Jeep as well for the summer. You know, with 3 kids and a big family and lots of luggage, we need a big car.
Well, how would we squish you into a tiny Volkswagen Bug or something?
My wife drives a Volkswagen. I hate squishing myself into that car.
Maybe an Aston Martin. Maybe we could stuff you in.
Sure.
Like you stuffed these apples. Tell me about them.
Yeah, hey, it's apple season in so many ways. Apples are certainly one of those great quintessential Canadian ingredients. And this is just a good example of the fact that, yeah, we can bake and do it quickly and have some fun and make treats as well. Very straightforward, just core them out, stuff them with a mixture of oatmeal and brown sugar, a little bit of butter, bake them, too easy.
Special apple? Any special apple?
Well, I think here in Canada, a special apple is an apple that we go and pick ourselves. You know, especially here in the Lower Mainland, you're surrounded by great apple orchards here. They're not that far out of the city.
No, but there's not many in the Shaw Tower.
No, I understand. But on Prince Edward Island, we've got great orchards as well, and it's a ritual for us in the fall. Take the kids apple picking.
What's the difference between a crab apple and another kind of apple?
Well, crab apple is really just a sort of a general term for a wild apple.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, wild apple trees tend to just sort of go to a homogeneous flavor, and they tend to get sour, and they're very tart, and that just tends to be the way wild apple trees end up. We tend to call them all crab apples.
Well, when you're tiny, you don't eat a little baby crab apple, very sour. You take it home to Granny so she can make jelly, crab apple
soak
jelly.
Soak it in sugar.
Of course. But it's a time of year where we yearn for food that warms the body and warms the soul. Do you have a comfort dinner when you've had a disastrous day?
This time of year, as the weather starts to get a little colder back home, it's time to start braising. It's time for stews. I really, when I'm asked what my favorite food is, it's stewing. I really enjoy the process of stewing.
And the secret is?
Time, patience, you know, great ingredients, of course, but understanding that it doesn't matter what meat you're working with. If it's tough, just give it time. It'll eventually get tender.
And you cook with booze, like with wine and sherry and vodka?
Do I ever? You should see my spirits cabinet, cram-packed, and every one of those bottles is almost empty.
So, that said, you're making a chowder.
Sure.
Little clam chowder, a big mussel chowder, an oyster chowder.
Sure.
Do you add a little Pernod? What do you add?
No, I don't use the Pernod. I mean, that's great if you're doing something bouillabaisse-y, you know, something a little more Mediterranean inspired. But back at home, chowders are very traditional on Prince Edward Island in the Maritimes,
Yes.
and we tend not to use any sort of spirits in it, largely because back in the day there weren't really any spirits, and you certainly didn't have the luxury
Right.
of pouring spirits into your dinner. That was just unheard of.
No, but if you pulled out a canned soup, you shot a little sherry into it, just so they wouldn't know.
Fanny, I have
it
no
was from the
experience with
can.
canned soup.
Well, you see, I do. And I know if you throw a little sherry in, they think you made it.
I didn't
Well,
make it, but I made it happen.
Okay, add a little fresh crab, a little sherry.
Sure.
You can fool them.
Sure.
Let's go into your kitchen. We have a clip. I think, well, you were recently in House and Home magazine.
That's right.
House and Home, and showed your kitchen, wrote a little bit about
Sure.
you, the
My
famous.
new kitchen.
Yeah, your new kitchen.
The blue
exactly.
kitchen, we call it.
Let's go to the blue kitchen.
Shall we?
Okay.
Little features that sort of resonate within a working environment. Things like the GastroNorm pans that we use. These pans are industry standard for restaurants all over the world. They come in a whole bunch of different sizes, shapes, and they're very easy to sort of inset into these drawers, and they work great for holding on to the ingredients that I use almost every day. Things like stainless steel for my sink design, for my pegboard. I really like this pegboard. It's a great way to organize all my tools, and you just know where things are. You don't lose them that way. It's a great place for all your gizmos and gadgets. My knife rack, for instance, every single one of those knives has a story to tell. For years and years, I imagined having all those knives out on display. So I guess it's a chef thing, but it works for me. Things like a spice library and an open pantry. Herbs and spices are a very big part of how I cook, and I'm fascinated by them. I'm fascinated by their stories. I've traveled all over the world looking for herbs and spices, so that's why I put them on display in what I call my spice library.
And you have lids on all your spices. I noticed. I bet there are no bugs in the Michael Smith
Spice collection. Actually, Fanny, one of those bottles is full of candied crickets from Tokyo.
Really?
Yes, it is, but that's not a spice.
And what do you do with a candied cricket?
Usually I wait till about 1 o'clock in the morning when the party's going pretty good and we start getting to crazy outlandish flavors, and out come the crickets.
Really?
Yeah.
So they say that we should eat bugs.
Well, they say that a lot of us actually do eat bugs without realizing
bet we
it.
do. But, you know, chocolate-covered grasshoppers,
Sure,
candied ants,
sure. They say that
protein.
if we're going to continue getting enough protein to eat, we may just be considering bugs in a different light.
Yeah, why not? So you said something about the knives, that every knife has a story.
Yeah. I think that that's perhaps a universal thing for chefs. We all remember our first knife. We all remember the first knife that cut us badly. We remember the things that happen with knives, different places where we got the knives, different restaurants, jobs, all of it. I mean, I'm just randomly thinking about knives. I have one particular knife that was with me from the very beginning of my career, and at one point I dropped it and broke the tip off of it. And then a few years later, I found myself cooking in Caracas, Venezuela. And we had this guy that would come every week with this worn-out old 50-year-old Vespa with no seat. Where the seat was, he had a grinding stone, and he stood up and rode it around. He'd arrive and park it in the back alley and kick it up on a kickstand, and he had this brake-like cable that he would run from the back wheel up to the grinding stone, and he had figured out a way to grind a knife with one hand while revving the Vespa with the other hand, and here we are sharpening knives. And one day it occurred to me, you know what, this guy could probably use a little boost. I went and found this broken knife of mine and gave it to him and asked him to give me this very sharp curve on the front of it. Because I was cooking with a lot of fresh tuna at the time.
Right.
It's very easy to butcher tuna until you get up to just behind the head. And I thought, well, this is a round knife, maybe it'll help. So I still have that knife. I don't butcher a whole lot of fresh tuna these days, but I've got all those stories.
Of course you do, and you have a lot of clocks. Let's take a look.
Every one of these clocks has a meaning. Hatteras, North Carolina is my favorite place in the world to go kite sailing. Hyde Park, New York is where I went to the Culinary Institute of America. Kingston, Ontario is where I opened my very first burger joint, the Canadian Grilling Company. Fortune, Prince Edward Island is where I live. Chiang Mai, Thailand, I think is where I had the very best street food I've ever had in my life. Hyde Park, London, England is where I did my Michelin 3-star apprenticeship. And Kenya is a place that means a lot to us. We work very hard every year to build cookhouses in rural Kenya.
Cookhouse in rural Kenya.
Yeah, we've built 6 of them now. We do an event every year on Prince Edward Island called the Village Feast. It's a giant fundraiser that sort of came out of a conversation a few community leaders and I had a few years back, where we sort of felt that in our community in rural Prince Edward Island, we needed a little morale boost. We needed to do something. And we got to thinking, and we decided let's just throw a steak dinner for 1,000 people. We'll have all local ingredients. We'll turn it into a festival. We'll have a great time. And then we started looking a little deeper into it and realized we need to have a purpose for this as well. We want to support both our village, but also another village. So we partnered with a longstanding charity on Prince Edward Island, Farmers Helping Farmers. And in the 5 years that we've done the event, we've now built 6 cookhouses. We're feeding several thousand kids a day a good, healthy, nutritious meal in rural Kenya because of this one event.
Oh, great. Have you ever thought of doing a Jamie Oliver thing and going into the Canadian schools?
Well, I do, in my own community. We just don't televise it. And I don't think that, I don't think I'm the only one. I think there's a lot of chefs out there that care for their communities and that are making an effort to engage with food and kids in their school systems, and I'm certainly one of them. But it's just not the sort of thing that I want to put on TV.
I wish you'd go into the hospitals.
Yeah, that's another can of worms, isn't it?
Why not? The North Carolina thing, the connection. Are you a grits boy?
Well, actually, my dad was born in North Carolina, but for me, Hatteras, the Outer Banks, it's one of the world's best places to go kite sailing. I'm absolutely passionate about sailing. I've done it my entire life. Used to be an avid windsurfer, but windsurfing's canceled now. We've all sort of moved on to kite sailing and make an annual pilgrimage down there every year, and we get a cottage on the beach and get to sailing.
How great. And if not food, what would it have been for you? I
think farming. I really do. I think over the years, as I've come to know farmers and the production of food, you know, Fanny, I would trade it all in right now for a 10-acre farm, self-sustaining, a house paid for, my family, a couple of pigs and chickens running around. It speaks to me, that elemental.
But by now, you must be a millionaire chef. Surely you can do that.
You know, I'm like everybody else, just trying to pay for my house and put my kids in college. That's all it is.
Put the kids in college, put them somewhere, do something. But PEI calls to you, Canada calls to you, dual citizen?
Yeah, but I forget that. It's hard to say this and not sound disrespectful, but I'm a Canadian. I don't identify with the values to the south anymore. I'm not really happy with what I see going on down there. And I really feel that, as I said, I came home when I moved to Prince Edward Island.
Why do I think you didn't vote for Romney? Just a guess.
That's a good guess.
Is it?
But, you know, I could have voted in New York State. New York always goes Democrat, so I didn't even have to vote. You know, I think if it had felt like it was on the edge, I would have got in there and made sure my vote counted too.
And what's next? What, new show in the hopper?
Well, working on continuing to work on the new show, keeping my team busy, new cookbook every year, but really staying focused on family.
Okay.
You know.
Well, I'm just going home to make some speedy edamame chicken hurrah.
There you go.
Or something like that.
Lots of great flavors in there.
I bet. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Fanny.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chef Michael Smith, 110 simple, speedy recipes, and it's called Fast Flavors. Remember, you can join me on Twitter at Fanny Kiefer or catch our conversations on YouTube. There will be many more shows to come. Until then, thanks for watching Shaw TV and being with me today.